Hello, hobby friends! I converted some Chaos Marines into Night Lords. My buddy old pal asked me to convert them, but since I have a fledgling hobby channel, I asked him if I could paint them too, and he said yes. So let's get to painting. First things first, I have to give them a bath. In glue. Polymer clay can take enamel spray primer, but I've had issues with it rubbing off. I'm not sure if that's due to my handling or the properties of the clay, but just in case, this mixture of Mod Podge and water should do a good job sealing it. It's okay if the glue wash pools a little bit, the water should help it dry to a thin layer so it doesn't clog any details. By the way, when I was taking these Night Lords outside to prime, I knocked this guy against the door frame and broke his sword off. I carried on with priming, but now it's time to fix it. I reattach it with some armature wire and superglue. Since I zenithal these minis with a medium gray, I'm using a medium gray to dry brush the parts in shadow. I don't have an opaque medium gray paint, but it's easy enough to mix from black and white. It was too dark, so I mixed in more white. For me, there's no real need to buy grayscale paints if I can just mix them on my own. Then I hit him up with a dry brush of pure white to pick out the details on the gray sections. The goal with this pre-shading approach is to simulate natural lighting with the zenithal, while increasing the readability of the details with the dry brush. Now I'm going to use some translucent blue craft paint. Upon applying it, I'm wondering if it's transparent enough. So I mix it half and half with some cheap acrylic varnish to reduce the opacity. It appears to be retaining the pre-shaded values better, but now it's too bright and a tad saturated. No problem. Adding a dash of black to the mix should fix the issue. Now that's the result I'm looking for. A transparent dark blue. Some of the brushstrokes are visible, but they should be more or less hidden by a highlight color. Speaking of which, let's mix one. I'm taking the same regular blue I started with and mixing it 50-50 with a light blue. Then I glaze it over the brighter patches where the gray undercoat is peeking through the dark blue. Even though I'm covering up the pre-shading with manual highlighting, I still think it was a good idea to do it. The undercoat is certainly helping to push the value of the light blue, if only a little. In any case, I go in with a second coat to push it further, covering less area than the previous one. For the trim, let's go with some yellow miniature paint. Ooh, that's a bit much. I've heard that it's hard to get a vibrant yellow on trim. If I were painting 3rd edition Ultramarines or Space Wolves, this would be a miracle. Too bad I'm not. I mix some of my favorite warm brown craft paint into my yellow Vallejo to shift the hue more towards a gold. It's still way too bright though. As you can see, it's much darker now. I forgot what I did and I don't have any footage of it, so let's just say I added some black paint or something. Anyway, this will make a nice gold shadow color. Similar to the blue, I hit up the sections of black with a mixture of black craft paint and matte varnish. I also use it for the joints of the power armor. Next, I paint the pouches with the warm brown from earlier by thinning it to a glaze. Also just like the blue, the resulting tan color is a bit splotchy and hiding the pre-shading work a little too much, so I mix in some light tan. Oh wait, that's Yup, that's clogged. I pull out the nozzle and push out the pigment with a paperclip. Now we're in business. I mix in the light tan. Its actual name is Elfic Flesh, but what kind of name is that? I mean, if you cut open an elf, is this the color of their flesh? Do they bleed tan? Anyway, the mixture created too harsh of a contrast. After washing it off the pouch, I utilize the brown again to create a mid-tone. With that established, I glaze on the tan mixture to make final highlights. Now I continue working on the gold trim using the yellow mini paint and brown craft paint mixture. Before, this flat yellow color looked too jarring, but it looks pretty at home as a mid-tone on this dark yellowish brown base coat. Then I apply a smaller highlight of pure yellow, followed up with a touch of the tan elf meat color. The last color is red. I'm using this red craft paint for the same reasons as the blue and the tan. The translucency should let me keep some of the pre-shading. The problem is that this cherry red looks a little too cold and magenta-ish when put over a grayscale color, so I quickly wipe it off with a damp brush. To warm up that cool red, I mix in some of that yellow I was using for the gold. However, this is way too orange. I should have guessed that the pigment of the miniature paint would prove too potent. I mix in more red to balance it out. Yup, that's the exact red I want. In addition to the bat wings, I also put it on the various cable details that are scattered all over the miniature. The main reason for this is to disperse the red throughout the whole piece. I don't exactly know why it is, but miniatures always look better to me when the colors used are balanced throughout multiple areas of the miniature. Also, by using a color that's already on the mini, there will be less colors competing for attention, resulting in a more uniform and harmonious look. At this point, I realize that the Aquila skull should be bone-colored, not red. I'm not super familiar with their lore, but I don't think the Night Lords work for Hydra. I don't feel like fixing it right now, so I'm putting the shoulder skull on the back burner so I can skip to the knee skull. Here, I'm using the same tan I used for the final highlight on the pouches. With that kneecap capped off, it's time to batch paint the rest of the team. But before that, it's soup time. Even though I have a lot of minis to paint, I need to take my time and avoid these shoulder spikes, so... Nah, just kidding. I'm gonna manually paint them gold later, so doesn't matter if they're blue right now. Because the vast majority of the blue sections are bordered by gold trim, it makes sense to go quick and fast since any spillover will be covered up by the gold soon. Again, I'm using the blue-light blue mixture to layer on highlights. Same as the dark blue, I'm going quickly. And just like the test model, I'm going in for a second round of light blue. Now it's time to clean up the blue with the gold trim. Here we go, I'm done with the gold shadow color. And it's only been 3 hours! 3 hours of carefully base coating trim. I'm so burnt out from that I'm skipping straight to the red, because I want to paint something fun. Maybe it's because of the vibrancy, or because I'm painting cables in addition to wings, but the step seems less tedious than the gold one. Though that's probably because there's a lot less red to base coat. I also hit up any grenades I see. And these claws are also getting some red. It's not supposed to be blood, I just think they would pop more. Perhaps this Night Lord chose this color to intimidate his enemies before the paint wasn't the only red on his claws. Back to the gold, I start applying the midtones and highlights. I considered doing my standard approach to metallics, which is to do a shadow undercoat, a translucent craft paint gunmetal or gold, and then an overcoat of a Vallejo metallic to get that shiny chromy metallic contrast. But that would require 2 additional careful coats, and I already know that 1 coat takes 3 hours. Instead, I think that non-metallic metal would be faster, since each layer is covering much less than the previous one. By the way, these NMM steps only took me 4 hours. It's much faster just to say non-metallic metal, seriously. Time for a new wet palette. Let's take advantage of this new real estate by mixing a highlight for the red. First I mix in yellow, but that's too orange for the highlight. Next I try Elf Ivory, but that's too pink. So I mix them together. Still a little too orange, so more red craft paint it is. It's just a tad pink now, but I like the cold feeling it has. My favorite red sections to highlight include this clump of cables on this dude's head and the claws from earlier. These claws are so thin that the only way I could think to highlight them was towards the points at the ends. This brings the attention of the viewer to the points while making them look sharper, in my opinion at least. I also used the red for the skin cloth. The cloth on the test model was already tan, so I glaze red to add some bloody transitions. For the other skin garments, I start with red to instill their fleshy origins. I'll work up to tan later. For now, while I'm at it, I base coat the skin of the Night Lords themselves. I once heard Miniac say that he was told by someone to tint the skin tone shadow towards the color of the blood underneath. So that's what I'm doing. Some of these trophies are fresh flesh, so they too are loaded up with a crimson coat. Once I'm through with the red, I start layering up to tan on the skin cloth. It takes a few coats, but anytime layering takes more than 1 coat, I stagger the coverage to build a gradient. Then I continue on with the trophies. I'm using the pre-shading as a guide to help me place the midtones. I use a lighter tan for the final highlights. There was some red on the trophy pole from earlier, but like always, a glaze of black hides all sins. I'm not sure how to paint a not alive face, so I take inspiration from Eons of Battle's video on painting Space Marine heads and start with an abnormal color. And what better color for a rotting face than that of Nurgle? After some highlighting, I did not think that this green hue was working out, so I glazed a purple shadow mixed from red and blue. The resulting desaturated purple proved to be a happy accident, very much not alive. The tan midtone and highlight looked right at home. Maintaining my lesson, I glaze purple onto these green marine heads as well. Then I get to layering. This is my first time working on an upside down head, but the Zenithal dry brush combo continued to be a guiding hand. On the other 2 mounted marines, I try layering on green again, this time using it more as a mid-tone rather than a shadow. And I think it's working, though the subtle purple shadow certainly isn't hurting. I want a darker skin tone on this guy, so I keep the highlights no brighter than the warm brown. The microphone marine also gets a brown layer, but for him it's just a mid-tone. It's Mr. Upside Down's turn to get some highlights. Then I hit him up with some splotches of brown to better tie the highlights into the shadows. Finally, it's Mike's turn to be highlighted. Now these lords are looking too much like Hydra cosplayers, so I tint them with a layer of brown. This is why I love this warm brown craft paint. It base coats, it layers, it tints, and it looks great on parchment, skin, bone, sand, and many other in-universe materials. I use the tan brown mixture quite liberally, then finish him off with a pure elf ivory. Whoops, can't forget to brush his teeth. Get it? It's 'cause I used a brush. These blends are not smooth at all, but I'm very happy with the overall look. I think that contrast and harmony of hue are much more important than any blend. Whoa, I almost ignored the gore. Like all the other highlighted sections, it's gotta get up to spec. After putting some brown on the remaining details, I base coat the bone areas. This sword looks like bone to me, so that's what it is now. Uh-oh, there's trouble in Wet Palette Town. Specifically, a lack of wet. Time for some emergency surgery. I use my hobby scalpel to make incisions in order to relieve the tension of the paper. Though I've never seen this procedure in a miniature painting video before, I'm sure it's common practice amongst the pros. Totally. With some water, my palette is flat and wetty for action. I follow up the brown bone base coat with multiple layers of a mid-tone until the final highlights. On the bone sword, I achieve gradients by dragging my brush in order to deposit more paint behind where it leaves the surface, allowing each stroke to leave a translucent gradient. This is my go-to strat for quick blends. Just a few more details to go. I'm getting sort of burnt out at this point, so I use a single coat of green craft paint for the Militarum helmets, and some yellow for the forehead Aquillas. The final detail, these Space Marine helmets, are given a similar treatment. I glazed some black to reinforce the shadows on the Salamander's helm. The blue paint did not turn out as well as the green here, so I manually highlighted it. I also did some highlighting on the black one too. That's it, they're all done. All I need to do now is pop them off the painting handles and hit them with some matte spray. Oh wait, I forgot to do the glow effects. They're already varnished, but it's never too late to add something. And I'm definitely not doing this an hour before I give them back to their owner. What are you talking about? By the way, the friend I'm painting these for has his own YouTube channel called Axolotl Aristotle. He talks about video games and politics, so check him out if you're interested. Anyway, here are the finished Legionaries. I'm rather proud of how they turned out, but they were a lot of work with all those details. I mean, Games Workshop just couldn't put enough details on these guys. They're sorely lacking. Still, these Night Lords deserve nothing but my best. They also served as an excellent experiment for slap-chopping detailed miniatures with craft paint. I hope my friend doesn't mind. Though I'd say you're probably better off using paints designed to go over-appreciating when slap-chopping. By the way, let me know what you think of this janky LEGO Gear mechanism for showing off miniatures. Let's try a more cinematic take. Thanks for making it to the end of the video, and have a good one. Oh, I found this transfer sheet after I gave them back. So it would have been nice to have found this earlier, but the 3D ones I made still have a unique charm to them. At least that's what I'm telling myself. See you later.